Look at this giant, diverse country, full of life. But what if I told you that the history you know is only the tip of the whole story? A much deeper and more surprising past is waiting to be revealed. Forget for a moment the dates and names you learned at school. Today we're going to dive into the secret layers of our Earth, unearth stories that have been silenced and unexpected connections between the past and the present. Do you really think you know the complete saga of Brazil, from the civilizations that flourished before Columbus to the complexity of our 21st century? Get ready. Because in the next few minutes your view of Brazilian history will never be the same again. Press the button and embark on this journey. Before the arrival of the Europeans, Brazil was a vast territory inhabited by millions of people, civilizations with sophisticated social organization, with a profound knowledge of nature and rich cultural expressions. The story we've been told has often erased or minimized the complexity of these original peoples. Look at the art of Marajó ceramics with its impressive details, or imagine cities that existed in the Amazon long before it was believed when the Portuguese caravels finally arrived in 1500. There was no discovery, but rather an encounter, or rather a shock for the indigenous peoples. This moment marked the beginning of a process of violence, war, massacre, exploitation, and incalculable loss. Diseases to which they had no immunity decimated entire populations. The search for gold and riches ushered in the predatory exploitation of natural resources and the imposition of a foreign logic on life. And what about local culture? At the dawn of a new century, the 16th, the Atlantic horizon brought with it unexpected figures. Imposing ships, powered by unknown winds, tore through the waters towards a coastline hitherto untouched by Europe. For the millions of inhabitants who had lived here for millennia, the arrival of these ships was not a discovery. Rather, it was a harbinger of an overwhelming transformation. The first contact, often romanticized, carried within the seeds of a future of exploitation and violence. The European search for new routes and riches set two different universes on a collision course. The machinery of the Portuguese colony in Brazil was ruthless, driven by the ambition for profit and inhuman exploitation. The sugar cycle, with its vast plantations and growing European demand, established a cruel production system based on the enslavement of millions of Africans forcibly brought to this land. Torn from their families and cultures, they were subjected to degrading living and working conditions. Treated as mere instruments of production, their bodies were the currency of the colony, their life force drained for the benefit of the metropolis. But this history of oppression did not silence the spirit of struggle. The original peoples, ancestral owners of this earth, bravely resisted the invasion and the attempt to erase their cultures. Led by figures such as Canhambib, they fought wars, organized alliances, and they defended their territories with courage and a profound knowledge of nature. And in the heart of the slave colony, Quilombos were born, refuges of freedom built by the daring and resilience of enslaved Africans. Palmares, under the leadership of Zumbi, became a beacon of hope for thousands of fugitives, a free territory where African culture flourished and resistance to slavery was organized. Each Quilombo was an affront to the colonial system, a demonstration that the desire for freedom was unquenchable. The struggle for survival and dignity united indigenous and enslaved Africans in different forms of resistance, from the preservation of their traditions to armed insurrection, weaving a complex web of opposition to exploitation that profoundly marked the history of colonial Brazil. Brazil, under the second reign of Dom Pedro II, experienced a period of relative political stability and remarkable cultural and scientific advances. The emperor, with his well-known inclination toward the arts and letters, encouraged the intellectual development of the country, while Rio de Janeiro, the capital of the empire, began to take its first steps towards urban modernity. With the introduction of new technologies and the transformation of its landscape, the arrival of waves of European immigrants, attracted by the opportunities in the coffee plantations and the promise of better life, injected new social and cultural dynamics into the fabric of Brazilian society, changing the demographic composition and contributing to economic growth. However, this period of apparent progress was deeply marked by a moral and social scourge: the persistence of slavery. Millions of human beings continued to be treated as property, subjected to an inhuman system that denied their dignity and freedom. The Paraguayan War, a bloody and prolonged conflict, tested the limits of the empire and exposed its weaknesses, leaving a legacy of losses and regional tensions. But in the midst of these transformations and conflicts, the seed of change was germinating with increasing force. The abolitionist campaign, led by intellectuals, journalists, jurists, and the growing pressure from civil society, was taking shape, denouncing the barbarity of slavery and calling for justice and freedom. The signing of the Golden Law in 1888 represented a historic victory. It formally ended a perverse system, but it did not erase the deep wounds and racial inequalities that would continue to haunt Brazil in the following decades, launching a long legacy of challenges for the construction of a truly equitable society. With the proclamation of the Republic on November 15, 1889, Brazil sought to break with its monarchical past and embrace a future of modernity and progress inspired by the Republican ideals echoing around the world. The figure of Marshal Deodoro de Fonseca personified this transition, marking the beginning of a new political regime. However, the dawn of the Republic did not mean an immediate end to the tensions and inequalities that had marked the country's history. The first Republican years were turbulent, punctuated by conflicts that exposed the deep social and regional fractures. The Canudos War in the Bahian hinterland and the Contestado War in the south were dramatic examples of the dissatisfaction of marginalized communities with the centralization of power. What about the lack of attention to their demands? These popular movements, with their complex motivations and tenacious resistance, revealed a country still in search of its identity and a social pact that included all its diversity. At the same time, Brazil was taking its first steps toward industrialization, a slow and uneven process, concentrated mainly in the urban centers of the southeast. The arrival of new technologies and the emergence of the first factories were beginning to transform the predominantly agrarian economy, attracting workers from the countryside to the cities, and creating new social dynamics and urban challenges. The Republican ideals of equality and citizenship were still far from reality for a large part of the population, and the first years of the Republic were a period of painful learning and gradual construction of a new political and social order. The 20th century in Brazil was a period of profound transformations and intense polarization, marked by significant advances, but also by long periods of authoritarianism. The Vargas era, with its project of modernization and nationalism, left an ambiguous legacy between the creation of labor rights and the imposition of an authoritarian regime. The promise of a grandiose and modern future, embodied in the construction of Brasilia during the government of Juscelino Kubitschek, represented a brief period of optimism and development. However, this trajectory was brutally interrupted by the military coup of 1964, which established a dictatorial regime that curtailed freedoms, repressed opposition, and plunged the country into a dark period known as the Years of Lead. Censorship, torture, and the suppression of political rights marked this era, leaving deep scars on Brazilian society. But the flame of resistance was never extinguished. Students, artists, intellectuals, and civil society organized themselves in different forms of struggle against the dictatorship, calling for democracy and freedom. The Direitos Já campaign, with its massive mobilizations and popular outcry for direct elections, represented a crucial turning point in the country's history, demonstrating the strength of civil society in the quest for redemocratization. The promulgation of the 1988 Constitution, the so-called Citizens' Constitution, sealed the end of the military regime and paved the way for Brazil's democratic reconstruction, a new chapter in the long and complex journey of our history. And so we come to contemporary Brazil, a country forged over centuries of history, marked by the miscegenation of peoples and the richness of its culture. We celebrate advances in science and technology, the vitality of our artistic expressions, and exuberance of our nature. Redemocratization paved the way for construction of more solid institutions and citizen participation in the country's political life. Initiatives such as the Real Plan sought to stabilize the economy and reduce inflation, impacting the lives of millions of Brazilians. However, the journey toward a fairer and more equal future still faces significant obstacles. Social inequality, the legacy of an exploitative past, remains one of Brazil's greatest challenges, with profound disparities in income and access opportunities. Environmental issues such as deforestation in the Amazon and climate change demand urgent and responsible action to guarantee the preservation of our natural heritage for future generations. The quest for a more inclusive society that respects diversity and guarantees the rights of all its citizens remains a project in the making, a constant dialogue between the past and the present, shaped by the choices we make every day. Today's Brazil is a complex mosaic, with its beauties and its contradictions, its achievements and its challenges. A country in constant movement, seeking to build a future that honors the richness of its history and aspires to a horizon of prosperity and justice for all its children. And that was our journey, a brushstroke through the vast and fascinating tapestry of Brazil's history. We saw that we are much more than the school books tell us, that each era has left its mark, its struggles, and its legacies, shaping the country we know today. Did this journey through time arouse your curiosity? If you felt the power of the stories we've told, then be part of this conversation. Leave your like so that this story reaches more people. Subscribe to the channel so you don't miss the next explorations and dives into our past and present. Share this video with your friends and family. Let's demystify Brazil's history together. And we want to know, which moment of our journey surprised you the most? Which character inspired you? Leave your comment below. Brazil's history is not written in stone. It continues to be made every day by each and every one of us. History pulses within you, and what you do with it is up to you. Until next time, hugs.